And it's been they put together a wonderful program. Bernie and Paul and the keynotes this week. You have James Bach, who's just aggressive in the best possible way, who's challenging us and making us think and advancing the community and the dialogue and the discussion. You have Trish, who's talking about the future of testing, but she actually went and did it first. I don't know if you caught that distinction. It's kind of a big deal. A different vision for test, which I was really impressed that we sort of reached out to people that are not in the traditional context-driven community there. We have Carolyn, who's working on changing STEM to include, I'd use different words, but more holistic and systems thinking, right, across the curriculum. Not just talking about it, but doing it. Ben, who's got congressional testimony for his work and presented on it, and it was an awesome live case discussion of real testing. And he got me, right? What am I going to say? I've been trying to figure that out since I got the phone call, because of course I took the gig, no question, right? But what am I going to say? Why would they pick me? And think about this. I got to believe that they saw something in me that was worth listening to, right? Well, this is what I've done. When we were at STQA Magazine, we started interviewing testers and asking them qualitatively, talk about your work and your challenges. We did the podcast for 2 years. Every week, we interviewed someone else. 2 years. And for Sticky Minds, every week we publish a new article. So what I've got now is about 200 stories, 200 data points of people that are in the community doing testing work. We can take those and throw them up and try to look for interesting patterns. That's the state of the practice. Now, anyone who's a context-driven tester is going to think, wait, you're trying to generalize, Matt. There's exceptions. And of course, there are exceptions. Organizations are different, but I think there might be enough patterns that might be interesting. That's what I'm going to try to do today. I hope you'll go along with me on that. Any questions before I get started? All right. So how do I start a talk on the State of the Union? Pete suggested that I pick my favorite actual State of the Union talk and sort of learn from that. And I didn't have to think very long. I know it exactly. I think it's a great idea. So I'm going to borrow a line or two to get started, if you don't mind. Now, pretend that it's 1962. America is about to get involved in a war in Asia that is not popular. It's about to get more involved, and it's about to get less popular. And Douglas MacArthur is going to West Point to give a speech to the Corps of Cadets. This is what he says. He says 3 words: duty, honor, country. These 3 words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. Now, there are unbelievers who will say they're just a phrase, unbelievers who will say every pedant, every cynic, every critic, every hypocrite will tear them down so that they are a mockery and ridicule. But these are what these 3 words do. They build your basic character. They give you strength when you are weak, and make you brave when you're afraid. Why do I know that story? And I'm sorry, I don't have time to read the whole talk. That would be it's an hour long. That would be the whole talk. But I know that because when I was 16 years old, I walked 4.5 miles to Fort Detrick, Maryland from my house. I got a haircut, and I bought the U.S. Army Officer's Guide and walked 4.5 miles back. And I read that book cover to cover, and that speech was the first part of the book. It changed my life. Now, I'm being honest. When I was 16 years old, I was not honorable. I had no sense of duty, and I was patriotic to the extent that it would benefit me. But those words inspired me. That was what I ought to be, what I could be. Change the direction of my life. So my hope is to find 3 words for testing. I'd like to talk about the state, what I see, throw out what I think the 3 words might be, and maybe in open season, y'all can tell me how I'm wrong and what the 3 words should be. All right? Started. The first couple of things I'm not super excited about, but they are important enough that I should mention. So when I started my career, my hair was all brown, I think. It was a while back. I went to a meeting, and there'd be a big table. You'd meet once a week. And you would have the project manager and the information systems analyst, and you would have the PMO officer and the development lead and the subject matter expert and the customer and the stakeholders and all these people sitting around a table. And I was at the end because I was a programmer. And they'd talk for about an hour, and I wasn't really involved in any of the conversations. And can you have that done by some date? And everybody would look at me, right? Programming was like the tiny little thing we have to do. And then everybody would go back to the work, and then I'd go do all of the work. Programming in the literature was the least important thing. It wasn't really interesting. It was a different century. We were trying to build maturity models. And something happened around 2001 with the Agile Manifesto, and we swung the pendulum the other way. And now we're in a world where programming is everything. Now, don't get me wrong. Programming is central to the story of software development. The programmers are building the product. But sometimes I wonder if we swung a little bit too far, because there are other important people in the story of development, like the customer. And when we look at things through the eyes of only programming, we end up thinking of testing as some other abstraction or model. We only talk about, say, code coverage. And there's a lot more to testing than that. And I think maybe over this conference we swung back a little bit. At the same time, in James's keynote, we talked about it's impossible to automate test away. But the standard for performance in our society, the technical skill requirements are growing up continuously. And we have automated some jobs away. There are supermarkets, there are fast food places where there's no one to take your order. You just go and press some buttons on a screen. And I understand that companies are working on that for ordering, either outsourcing the ordering process to a different country in real time or doing voice recognition. Siri's getting pretty good. So I think something is lost. If you've used one of these kiosks, something in the experience, the flavor of the experience is lost. When you don't know what the name of the fruit is that you're trying to order, and you have to get someone to help you out to actually be able to check out, or you don't know the weight of the thing, or there's no one to bag your stuff and you accidentally squish your eggs or your bread, right? So something is lost in that. There's a flavor. But it's a change that's part of our society, and it's impacting the way we do test and think about testing, and I thought it's worth mentioning. But what I'm really interested in is more like this, the intractable transience of test, which is a phrase I made up. And gosh, I hope it's right, because if I'm using it wrong, Michael Bolton's going to call me on it. But so from what I see in testing, we talk about this division between technical and non-technical testers. I'm not sure that's the most interesting division. In testing, how many people was this their first cast? 9/10 of the room. And that's great. But I can tell you that 7 years from now, I suspect many of the people in this room will be out of test. I don't know where they all go. I'm still here. But some people become analysts. Some people become the product owner, they become managers, they move to customer service, they go back to real estate, I don't know. But we have high turnover in tests. This is something we've been aware about. My clients that I've been talking to have been working on this for some time. How do we get turnover lower? And I think that maybe not everyone wants to make tests their career. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we should plan on relatively high turnover compared to other fields. Like, medical doctors, probably slightly lower turnover. Maybe we need to figure out these two groups, which the transience is the group that comes and leaves within a few year period. If I'm in a large organization and we have high turnover, how are we going to train? Because we need to be constantly training, because we're going to have continuous churn in staff. And how do we keep these people and present them opportunities in our organization? If they're going to go anyway, That might be a great customer service manager. That might be a great product owner. Their time here, they should be learning about our organization because they know about the organization, they can go do something else, right? As opposed to losing them. Testing is a wonderful training ground for liberal arts skills. You have limited time, limited information, conditions of ambiguity. You have to make tough decisions and make strong recommendations. You need to learn how to communicate. Testing is a fantastic training opportunity for most American business roles. Let's take advantage of that. And if we have people who are going to be, I want to make testing my career, I'm going to make an effort, okay, then their role has to transition a little bit. They need to learn about coaching and training and how to work with larger groups. Now, there are exceptions. If you're in a small market and you're a test manager and you can define your own process and it's good and valuable and awesome and fun, and you hire for fit, if you're Jason Coutu in Saskatoon, Canada, or Salt Lake City guy, Dwayne Green. If you're Dwayne Green in Salt Lake City and you train your own team, then you might have significantly lower turnover. Context is king. But it's a pattern that I'm seeing that I think we should be talking about, and I'm much more interested in that than technical versus non-technical testers, right? But that brings us to the next problem, is that we don't even know what we mean. Did anybody else notice the first and the second keynote use the word test in entirely different ways? We can't even agree on what the word test means. Or how about release manager? Or test case? Or we use words that we have shallow agreement on. If your organization is trying to start quality assurance, trying to start into testing in the Google testing, help me do it, they'll get a bunch of different advice from Google, and PageRank is worthless in figuring out qualitatively who's giving better or worse advice. On top of that, we have a wide variety in code bases and strategies. So testing, it's all kind of sounds the same, right? You just do session-based test management. But it's wildly different. Well, someone is here today, and I was talking Monday, and they were working on a greenfield project, same company. Some projects take 4 months for test release cycles. Big, large, legacy, inherited stuff. The greenfield work they can release every 2 weeks, but the goal, of course, is to release multiple times a day. So we use words that mean different things to people that we don't know very well on projects and environments that are very different. It's a challenge. What does all that up to? Well, high turnover, different words, wildly different scenarios, a lot of ignorance about what we do. Outside of this room, outside of context-driven, especially outside the test community, people just have no idea what we do. At Star West last year, Michael Kelly told the story of an interview with an executive group for a director of test, and the conversation was all about offshoring and outsourcing and certifications and whatever, and the guy stopped the conversation halfway through and said, well, can we talk about what the goal is for the test group? Like, what do they do, and how can we do it better? And the executives hiring said, oh, we don't really know what test does. Like, you're just a little box we have to check to get the code to production. I was at a conference last May, and the keynote speaker said, you want to follow international standards so that when the project fails and you are sued, you can say, well, we followed the standard, right? So you can't send us to jail or take our money because we clearly did the best we could. Is it just me, or is that ridiculous? I mean, has anybody been on a multi-million-dollar project failure? I've been on 2, right? Everybody knew that thing was going to be a failure. Every single person in that room, all of us on the project, it was a mess, it was a train wreck. There was a dead fish on the table that everybody could smell, but you couldn't talk about it. I talked about it, but that wasn't very smart. And I transferred out of those projects well before they crashed and burned, because we all knew it, right? Healthcare.gov wasn't tested very well. I bet it was tested pretty well. I bet there were people that raised issues to their management. I bet there are people that made phone calls, tried to catch people in the bathroom. You know what I'm saying? This stuff doesn't work. And they were told what? Oh, well, strictly speaking, personal information isn't a high risk, so it's not on the list. People don't understand the value that we can bring, and I think that value is compelling. I want to talk about how we can change that. We're also in an awkward position. This is Edgar Schein's book, Humble Inquiry, which is it's really thin. You don't have to read it. I'll give you the highlights. If you want to, you can. It's a good book. He's a professor, department chair at MIT in the business school. And his basic premise is this, that if you go to a culture that has a high ceremony, the classic example is North Korean, or Korean, I'm sorry, South Korean, and the British, and you go with Korean Air, the airline pilot and co-pilot, and you go with a British doctor, maybe they're a knight, Sir Knight, the top of the line, and their operating team. You have a high-status person working with a low-status person. When the low-status person sees a mistake, they are unlikely, by the rules of their culture, to correct the high-status person. Now, what happens in an airliner or on the operating room table when you're afraid to correct someone who makes a mistake in the moment? This is a really easy one. Somebody tell me. People die, right. Now, usually, we don't have that situation in software. There are a few notable examples where we do, and they turned out badly. But what Schein said is that the social structure makes it hard to do the correction. Testing is very fascinating to me. When I read this book, I said, yeah, because testing puts the people who are, relatively speaking, lower status in the role of saying your whole job is to correct the high status person in a way that will impact change. That's challenging. That's hard, right? And my one frustration with the book is Schein, he's the department chair at MIT in the MBA program. So, like, his clients were the CEOs. So the book is about how, as a CEO, to create the environment where the people will make the correction, give you the advice. His key words is ask, don't tell. I think on a good day, that's what we tried to do with the interviews. But it doesn't tell you what to do if you're on the bottom. That's not his audience. So I started thinking, well, who did that? What community was in a relatively low status role that said, we think we got this figured out. We think we can help. Just let us do it. And it's happened before. The Agile community, right? The Agile community was 15 people gathering in Snowbird, Utah. It said, hey, we've had some success. And this thing with a long table where you have 20 different people and one programmer, where you meet once a week for your hourly status meeting, it's not working. The process and the template is not working. We should stop doing that. We think we've got a better way to do it. Then we're going to write it down, and we're going to tell you about it. We're going to get together the stuff we agree on, and there's some things that divide us. We'll get together with the stuff we agree on, and we can talk about it. That became the Agile movement, and that was a breath of fresh air to the software development industry, I think. I don't know. You might disagree. So, what's the state of Agile today? I'm going to make an assertion that Scrum is winning the process discussion. So, and I'm just going to, let's do a quick poll, right? So if I were to ask how you describe how you do software development at your organization today, if you would say something like, we're Scrum-ish, we do Scrum, but we're trying something like Scrum, we stand up every morning, we got cards, we're planning in sprints, who's in a situation something like that, right? So I think it's fair to say that Scrum is winning. Here's A couple of interesting data points. Of the teams that have implemented something like Scrum, does anyone know in 1995 at Easel Corp, when Schwaber and Sutherland invented modern Scrum, does anyone know the problem they were trying to solve? Or how many of you, when your bosses decide to go to Scrum, knew the problem they were trying to solve? Anybody? Jason Katu. Yeah. Somehow I'm not surprised. But not many, right? So here's the thing at Easel Corp. They had requirements churn. Bam, 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 bam. You know, the VP of sales comes in, I just closed this deal, drop everything and build it. The CEO has a new vision, drop everything and build it. The marketing folks say, if we just have these checkboxes checked in this comparison matrix, you know, a gap analysis says we're going to drop everything and build it. And at the end of 6 months, when senior executives gathered to see what had been built, the answer was nothing. Nothing. Because we had to drop everything and build it all. We spent most of our time merging. Right? The other alternative to Scrum is extreme programming. At the time, the two big methods, right? Extreme programming. Who knows what problem extreme programming solved? A few more hands, right? Extreme programming came out of Chrysler. Chrysler had these big, huge, long releases. They would do a year of requirements, a year of design, a year of code, and by the time you were halfway through the code, if you were lucky, there'd be a reorg, your project would get canceled, then you'd have nothing to ship. Same symptom, nothing to ship, completely different problem. The Chrysler problem was probably more common in corporate America at the time, I think. The teams that went to Scrum, they picked the method, they often picked the wrong method, and I think we're still trying to get over that. Does anyone know what the Scrum Guide says about testing? Of the teams that are doing Scrum, right? It does. It has the word testing in it. It does. But pretty close, Jeremy. The Scrum Guide says testing should be done by embedded members of the team, not a separate and distinct team. How do you do it? Oh, that's not in there, right? So teams went to Scrum and said, go to 2-week iterations, and we got to keep our specialties, and we didn't get any direction about how to do technical practices, and all of a sudden we had to test a way faster. And mess, right? At least in corporate America. There are exceptions. But I think that's the state of Scrum testing. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Something else I wanted to cover is this idea of the team that takes 4 months to do the test release cycles. Right? How do you get to take a 4-month test release cycle? What's that about? Really? Right? I would argue that when you're talking in times that long, it's almost never about the actual work. It's about the time you spend waiting and in queues. It's about, I need an environment up. Test doesn't have branch 1.4.5, so I need to wait for that. I'm waiting on a bug fix, or the work is ready for me to do, but I'm working on something else right now, so I'm going to come to it later. That's a queue. More than half of the time, sometimes 3/4 of the time, if you do analysis. We know how to fix this. We can find ways to get rid of the queues and wait states. We have the systems thinking skills to figure this out in this community. So what I would suggest is that context-driven testers, exploratory testing, talking about who should do the checks and when should they happen, risk management, the ability to dial the testing up and down instead of thinking of it as a set of test cases that we have to run that takes roughly a week, but instead looking at the tests uniquely, is what corporate America, and I don't know about the rest of the world, but these failing Scrum orgs desperately need. We know how to solve the problem. They just don't know we exist. That's a huge opportunity. So what are we going to do about it? Well, I want to come back to this idea of 3 values I mentioned earlier. 3 words. Duty, honor, country was what Douglas MacArthur used to rally the troops for an unpopular war and a nation that didn't even want them there. We've had some of these values presented through Scrum and XP, and I think we need to select them very closely. I don't think we should just cut and paste somebody else's values and say, yeah, context-driven testing is simplicity and communications and feedback. I think we need our own words. I'm going to give an example why. In the Scrum literature, there's a lot of discussion of courage, right? An example is the citizen who stood in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square and changed the world. And it's a wonderful story. But if someone is an employee at a company, they have a job, and they will be rewarded if they follow the process, and they think that maybe this context-driven thing is cool and that we should start doing that, we can't really go to them and say, have courage, just do it. You're like the cowardly lion, all you need is an injection of courage. The reward system isn't right. We need to find ways to change the reward system and influence the right people to make a difference. Courage! As wonderful as it sounds, it's not quite what we need. So I've got 3 words I wanted to recommend to you that I think might make a difference, a way to think about what we can do as we leave, and they're very simple. They're honesty, right? If we bury the facts that we know, we end up with the healthcare.gov mess. Right? A little bit of research that I've done into that says that it was people knew what was going on, they just didn't feel empowered to do anything. Capable. We, as a test community, can solve greater problems in the development community. I really think we can. We've got the systems thinking skills. We can help these folks out. We're the experts on context. The experts on context are here in this room. I went to a conference last week with 1,800 people at it. Not a lot of experts on context. And that makes a huge difference. We're capable. And reach. Personally, I'm interested in reaching out beyond testing. Now, someone will say, Matt, you're degrading. You're saying we shouldn't be just testers, and that's degrading testing. Not at all, man. I love testing. Tester is me. It's something that I've lived and breathed for a long time. But when you go into an organization, it's kind of messed up, and you make testing pretty good, well, you're still delivering buggy code often. And you fix it, and then you get a new build. You get a new build late, interjecting a wait state. And you got a lot of bugs because we don't know how to not create regressions. So I think by moving questioning and checks up earlier, we got to find a way to communicate the value of this to people who think they already have it all figured out, which is the honest and capable part. I think we have an opportunity to change the world, right? Which goes back to what I said at the beginning. Why am I up here? I mean, thanks. And the list that Anna read was pretty impressive, but it's really just one thing a year. So what if 10 years from now we were still around? That transience problem wasn't as bad, and we'd all done 10 things. We might have a chance to reach the industry with honesty and our capability. I'm really pleased and honored to be here. And I just want to talk about the opportunity we have, because I think it's huge. Thank you. I'd like to hear your questions.
All right, the beautiful mind that is Matthew Heusser. Let's go to open season. Hold up your green cards. It's green cards. 144.
He said, hold up your green cards, because you couldn't hear him because he's rich.
Say something more.
You can always ask me to sing the jingle. I'd be happy to. Just saying.
Let's go straight into 144. 144, please stand up.
I'm Natalie, Natalie Bennett with Doran Jones. I mostly have a comment. I just wanted to confirm. You did say that you imagine that physicians have a relatively low rate of turnover compared to testers, maybe? Was that, you made a comment about that?
So I think the
Doctors?
testers have a high rate of turnover.
Yeah, but you mentioned
relative to-
doctors.
I suspect that doctors keep doctoring for longer than testers keep
Doctors
testing.
actually have a shockingly high rate of turnover, and the only reason that it's not higher is that the debt that they're in, and it's for, I think, a lot of the same reasons that we have maybe high rate of turnover, because they're coming in, they've got managers telling them metrics, and
You got a red card right
Yeah.
beside you, Natalie.
Hey.
Please
I-
stand up.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Rochelle. I think the point of that wasn't that testers have a high rate of turnover in testing, that testers leave testing for other roles, and that doctors probably, if they leave their current role, still remain doctors, just in another capacity.
You, Natalie.
my understanding is that they leave doctoring entirely because it sucks. But I will have to double check the data on that. But that's, I mean, I used to work in medical, and
That
doctors
sounds like a
don't like
fantastic
doctoring.
article for Sticky Minds. Just saying.
103, please stand up. Oh.
Hello, my name is Yara from Doran Jones. Yeah, I am. I had a question. You did mention the high turnover rate for testers. What is the test community doing to assist new testers, lower some of those barriers, you know, so that it's not so difficult to kind of
Well, you can think about testers, right? Like, how many 9-year-olds say, when I wake up, I'm going to be a tester? Does anybody? Right? My daughter did. Yeah. Now I have 2 data points. Yeah. So it's kind of it's a role that people say more often than not when I ask them how they became a tester. The answer is I kind of fell into it, right? And so some people fall out of it, and we've been trying to fight that for a long time. I think the place to start is at the local company. If you've got more than one tester, like, what can I do within my role to keep people interested in my company? But I'm kind of, it might just be okay. Maybe testing is something that many people come in and out of, and there's a few people that are stalwarts that say, this is really what I want to do. Maybe that's okay. And once you say that's okay, the way you look at things changes radically, right?
Okay, we've got a whole host of same threads. I missed the ones on this side, sorry. Hold them up high, please, until I signal you. And carry on. Brilliant.
To follow on this, basically, Michael Larson. Just wanted to follow on. One of the reasons I think that testing is a transient role within organizations is that testers are, for the most part, unless you are specifically writing code, we are broad generalists, and we're designed to be, and we should be. We are the ones that need to look at the product from a universal aspect. So we bring a lot of skills to bear to be able to do that, at least if we're good at what we do, I hope. That also means that since we have to pivot so dramatically a lot of the time, we are oftentimes good candidates to move into other roles. During the course of my career, I have been a systems administrator and a tester. I've been an application engineer and then back to being a tester. I've been a customer service rep and then back to being a tester. I've been a tech writer and then gone back to being a tester. So it's not so much that we just leave testing, it's that we actually have a certain kind of mobility that somebody who does programming, and I'm not disparaging when I say this, but it's a more of a specialist role, and testers, at least as of right now, are considered to be generalists. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It gives us flexibility, and we can move where an organization needs us. Personally, myself, I consider myself to be a lifelong tester, but I'm proof right there that if they need me in another role for a period of time, sure, I can adapt to that, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yep. Yeah, Dr. Kaner once said that he considered his career a dance around software quality. So he went and got a law degree, and he did research into the law of software quality. He managed a group that included tech writers. He was a tester. He becomes a professor of software engineering. So I think that's fine.
Just to recap the stack, we've got a whole bunch of same threads, 36, 232, NAN, 107, and 97. We've got a couple of new threads on the stack, 232, 242, 170. Take it away, 232.
Hi, JCD. So just as a quick poll, how many here are 5 years or under as far as amount of time testing, as opposed to first time cast? So one possibility is that we're just less organized, as opposed to that we're all new. I don't know which it is, and possibly the lack of organization is because, as Michael alluded to, we're generalists. So being specialized as test isn't something everyone perceives themselves as. They may perceive themselves in a sort of broader role. I'm the go-to guy, I'm the cleaner-upper, I'm the janitor for the group almost, rather than as a QA specialist.
Yeah, context is so hard there because there's so many different definitions, and really that only mostly applies to organizations that have a multiple of roles supporting a greater business, right? So if you are a test outsourcer, it's probably really important for you to keep your people good and interested. And you probably you want the people who are going to make testing a career. And you're probably going to, so it's very hard for me to come up with this because it's so contextual. And your point's well taken.
42, same thread.
Yes, I'm Jessica with Doran Jones, as you guys probably already know. And I wanted to talk to the point of supporting testers. And I think that each of us in this room bears a certain responsibility as a tester if we've been in the field to support new testers. And I think that happens so much in this community already. I've felt and received a huge amount of support from the people in this community, and I think that it behooves us to help support new testers because we can build more longevity into testing if people feel that they have somewhere to go, somebody to ask questions to when they experience difficult moments or challenging situations, because we do have some shared experiences here, and being able to mentor one another, whether we're in the same city or whether we're thousands of miles apart, is an integral part of the learning process for all of us. I know that I learn from people who are thousands of miles above me in terms of experience, and I also learn from people who are just testing for the first time. So I know that I will be focusing on taking a great responsibility for mentorship, and I think that if we can each just keep in touch with one other person who's testing, we can help to build longevity in the field.
No, thank you, Jessica. If I can respond. So someone else earlier said something about think globally, act locally, and that people that are in your local community, I think, are very good, especially if they're at a different company, so they can tell you how it really is and sort of cry into their beer as you talk about things without having to worry too much about she's going to tell so and so is going to tell so and so, right? So personally, I'm involved in something called the Miyagi-Do School of Software Testing, which is a zero-profit, non-commercial. I think I'm allowed to mention it because we don't take any money ever. So if you have no budget and you can't fly to CAST and you just are never going to get training and you can't even afford a subscription to a magazine, but you have a web connection, you can get involved in communities that will help you for free. Sometimes we can be a little bit flaky, but there's options out there, and promoting those is good. Being those is better, probably. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, I'm Marcus Gettner. So I want to go back to the thing that you mentioned with, well, look forward 7 years from now, we're probably not going to be tester anymore. I think I read something similar in a book from Craig Larman and Buzz Waller, who said there's this pattern they observe with programmers who are there for 4 years, then step into an architect or designer role, then they move on to management. I think there's a several similar career path that testers go into. The problem that I see is that how does this leave us with when it comes to the state of the industry with software development? Well, you have a couple of people who have been in exercise, who have experience of 5 years, then they moved on. And all their models, all their management practices stem from these 5 years of practice, experience, which are probably 10 years old, right? So I think what you mentioned Miyagi-Do, what the software craftsmanship movement as well tries to employ there is to move away from that model and say, all right, we're creating software, but we want to avoid to burn out people just within 5 years, right? Because we certainly need to change that in order to be sustainable in the long run as a community that builds software. What do you say about that?
So there's a half-life to many career fields. That would be in 10 years, half the people are out of it. And in 20 years, 75% of the people are out of it. And in 30 years, 87.5% of the people are out of it. It's not statistically valid, right? Because people like retire before you can keep going. But extending the half-life of testing so more people catch on fire and more people want to make it their career, I think is a wonderful thing. And that's good. If I heard you right. Yeah, sure. Fire it up.
The Alex Bance. Talking about the whole 70% turnover, high turnover in testing. I guess we've been lucky we haven't had almost any turnover in the last 5 years. But I was saying 5 years ago, I was there. I was at that level of doing that old school test requirement, write the test case, follow the steps, and thinking, I can't do this forever.
There's probably high turnover in that, right?
But then, like, I see the first timers here grow the excitement here. This community, I see more kind of bucking that trend, because this is actually 5 years ago. We got James Bach. We brought him in for his rapid software testing course. Started reading that stuff, and I was like, oh, there's actually is a career path in testing. And now I can't imagine leaving the field where 5 years ago I was, inches out. And I'm sure if we could expose more of those people that are turning over into the interesting and fun experimental testing.
So this talk was, I was trying to do testing state of the practice, right? Not awesome, super context-driven, we're doing it state of the practice. Because I don't know a whole lot of organizations that have sort of implemented that culture across the board, right? I do know that Jason Coutu, I mentioned earlier, in Saskatoon did that, and his turnover is remarkably low, and so is Dwayne. So if we see more of that bubbling up, maybe those things change. That's the state today. I would love to see that change. I think we're a long way from it being a career. I think we're still going to have turnover. Could we have a lot less? Yeah, probably.
Perfect segue. I'm Jason Coutu, if you haven't met me. 8 years hiring, training, mentoring, inspiring testers. My turnover rate is 0%. How do I do it? I inspire and I mentor. I do it at work and I do it for my community. There was 0 tester community in Saskatoon. I now have 2 full years of tester community meetings that I record and I broadcast. They're available on YouTube. I tweet about it, I talk about it. Everybody who knows me in Saskatoon knows I'm a software tester, knows I'm a professional software tester, because I don't just introduce myself as a tester, I introduce myself as a professional software tester. This is my career. That is how I talk about it. People see my passion. I said I have 0% turnover. It's actually negative turnover. I've turned business analysts back into testers. I've turned field application engineers into testers. And I've turned customer support people into testers. And they've all come and they've all stayed with me.
Hi, my name is Stanley Calix. Okay, going back to this conversation, I see the longevity of a tester tied to maybe 2 or 3 key points. One is financial. Basically, at any organization, and given the skill set of many testers, they may see more financial opportunities at other positions within the company. The other thing was a point that was made during one of the talks today was that oftentimes companies see testing as an expense. So in this regard, it's not so much that the testers don't want to say testing, they just have this risk with respect to if they stay there, they still, like, whenever that expense is no longer seen as needed, then they no longer have a position. So they always tend to seek either other places to go or other position to move to. And then oftentimes it could be a combination of those two.
I think that is often a factor of this ignorance of test. I think I had a slide on that, right? Where we don't understand the value testing brings. We think it's overhead. It's an expense. It is an expense. Testing is an expense, by the way. So there's uncertainty there. And it's uncomfortable and weird. And this other guy knows this other job that maybe I'll just go over there. Maybe that's some of what's happening. And if you don't have that at an organization, then maybe you have less turnover. Sure, that makes sense to me.
All right, on the same thread stack, we've got 97, 147, 134, and then we're going to 3 predator tweets. Oh, we'll go with that.
Predator tweets.
And then we've got on new thread 232, 112, 242, 134, 76, 243. 97.
What? Is it 97?
Tatiana from SyncSort. Just wanted to comment on the statement that a lot of testers fall into the role. And I know that that happened to me. And one of the reasons is because testing is not something that you learn in college. At least as far as I know, there is no...
You never took a testing class in college?
Nope.
Really?
So I think most of us studied to be somebody else. So when you do fall into the testing role, you tend to try to get back to what you actually originally studied for. And just attending this conference and seeing how much science is there to testing, it just seems like it would be a logical either major or at least courses to teach to developers. Just a comment.
That is an ongoing discussion that would be... So AST has a education SIG, special interest group, and there are a number of different avenues that I would suggest we have that ongoing discussion. We've got a lot of work to do there, but a lot of us are going to be around all night. Right?
Hi, I'm Kate from Huge. I'm going to build on what...
Hi, Kate.
Hi. I'm going to build on what Jason said, and I actually wrote it down because it's something I wanted to make sure I spoke well of. I hear a lot that people don't really understand what we do, we're not respected, we're not empowered. I kind of refuse to accept that, and I don't think anyone here should. And you are empowered to do something about that. It doesn't matter your level, it doesn't matter what you do, everyone here can be part of that change. I'm getting the feeling that you don't really think so. You're thinking, oh, in my organization, I couldn't possibly do anything. But you possibly can. You just need to do it. I think that's how Jason has been successful. That's kind of how I've done it as well and make that difference. And in my company, we are respected. There's no kind of difference between development and QAs, which is what we're called. We're part of the team. We're equals and things like that. We don't necessarily have that problem. It took 2 years to get there. But it was a constant fight, but you can do that too. And not just everyone kind of stepping up to that. And you can totally be empowered. You can make that difference. Anyone here can make that difference. And in that environment, turnover is not going to be quite as an issue.
So I think that's an inspiring vision for the future. Yes, I know, you're awesome, right? There's lots of people in this room that are awesome. No, there's lots of people in this room that are awesome. This is CAST. We attract high-quality people. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. I'm glad. you know, you're awesome. I wish we could make every organization like that. And my hope was to talk about how to do that. And if I was a bit of a downer on the present, it's only because I'm so excited about the future.
Katrina, I was on the same thread as the university courses on testing. I spoke at a meetup in my city recently and had a professor in attendance who asked me to come to his class and repeat the presentation because they don't have a lot of knowledge about testing in their computer science department. So I just wanted to sow that seed for others here. Your university might not have a course, but creating education material is really hard, and professors are open to having guest speakers come in and talk in one of their classes during the semester about software testing. There's an opportunity there to sow those seeds.
Thank you, Katrina. Yeah, my school does. I went to Grand Valley State University, and they have 2 courses in software testing. And Lansing Community College has a course in software testing. Florida Institute of Tech has courses in software testing. There's lots of energy. When CAST was started, AST had a academic outreach mission that we've kind of gone away from. It would be great to try that again. I think the energy's there.
147. There he is. Same thread.
Hey, this is Jay again. I wanted to piggyback off of what Jessica had mentioned as far as education, and I think that it should go beyond just educating people who are less experienced than you are, but also have similar, even more experience. Because like where I'm at, there's people who have a lot of miseducation related to testing, and I think helping to clarify and rectify their misconceptions goes a long way to advancing the craft.
Yeah, there's a lot of mythology out there, but I think it's mostly washed away through turnover and new people and energy. So I think we're getting there.
Hi, it's Jean Ann again. I wanted to jump on that bandwagon. One of the things that I do is I get involved a lot with weekend testing, and I've done guest speaking or guest facilitating for the Australian New Zealand group, as well as facilitator for the Americas. I invite anybody to join in. We teach skills. This is the focus. Yes, we help other companies, and we do. We help try and test, for a couple hours, give them a little different perspective. But the point is take the opportunity of many free chances to get some education. Don't rely on your company, because your company nowadays probably is not going to teach. And don't necessarily rely on team members, because they may not be interested. I've worked on many teams where no one was interested at all. They just were 9-to-5ers. They didn't care. They just wanted to get through the day. Okay, that's their focus. But for those of us, and this is why I enjoy coming back to CAST and why I love being with all of you, is because I find people like me who are just weird. We love to test. And Matt, I will never get away from testing. This is my calling. And I'm good at it. And I love it. And I want to keep doing it. So, I'm willing to help people if they want to listen. And I've got all kinds of exercises. But I've had a lot of situations where people didn't want to listen either. Okay. But I feel like you're missing out. So make your own opportunities. Try and do these weekend testing sessions or other types of sessions. Ask for mentoring from, I believe there's Skype sessions from James, Anne-Marie, and Michael. Yep. Take advantage of their knowledge and their experience. And talk to each other. We've got so many people that are willing to have relationships. And you can learn just by having a conversation. I get inspired every day, every single day. just by listening.
And if I haven't said it, Jean-Ann and Michael, I appreciate all the work you do with the weekend testing, which is another free, less commitment than Miyagi-Do. It's just give a Saturday to come in and try something different. Try something different. And there's a lot of them. There's one in your time zone probably. Try something different so you can explore it safely. Right?
All right, thank you. We have a couple of printer questions. This one's from Rivensteinberg. Any idea why other disciplines are not thinking experts in context?
Why? So on some levels, when you push people hard enough, they always say, well, of course, you're going to do this software different for the space shuttle than you would for than you would for your little like test thing which runs and checks all your links on your website to make sure that none of them are broken, have become old. Of course, you're going to have to do that development differently. But then literature this is the right way to do it. I think that the nature of test being so ambiguous, being so liberal artsy, dealing with risks, and the nature of modeling risks has sort of made us work on these problems in ways that other people have managed to avoid for a little bit longer. And it's a lot harder to do hard empirical modeling on software process. So for, say, UX or for, say, programming. Factoring in the context becomes very challenging. In CS courses, you're usually context-free, right? It's write a computer program to do this, and then you write it, and there's no context. That's the introduction in college. Our introduction to testing is mostly in the real world, where context is king.
Thank you. This one's from Krishna Goth, and it's a question to Matt. How should we develop to influence devs and higher-ups staying testers? How can we become big or larger at least?
Yeah, this is an odd and challenging topic that I'm going to have to think on a little bit. My first response is that asking, in the Shines book, right? This is all about asking instead of telling. So try to understand where they're coming from. And there's lots of people skill books. There's 7 Habits, there's Getting to Yes, and all this kind of stuff, right? I read it when I was developing and had to tell people things they didn't want to hear, and fundamentally didn't want to hear it. But we have these tools to figure out context. So you figure out where someone is coming from. You learn how they think. So learning about different thinking styles versus tactile learning versus visual versus audible. And then when it is time to engage, if you have a relationship with them, you'll be a lot more influential than if you're a stranger on the street shouting at someone. Have you noticed that this week?
And the final one we have from the Twitter printer is from Veritax. And Veritax says, with pace of technological advancement, is it possible that tester turnover is due to skill atrophy or obsolescence?
There's a lot of things going on there. It's just something that I noticed. I'm inspired by the response from the crowd, by the way. Intractable, my left foot, we can solve this, right? That's cool. But in organizations that don't change much, especially if you're a subject matter expert tester and you're really, really good with the rocket stuff, and then the role goes away, and your strength was the rocket stuff, finding a new job as a tester can be challenging. So if you stay on the same thing for too long and don't change, you get stuck, and then something happens to the role, yeah. But I don't think that's a big part of it. Okay. I get in trouble when I jump to intent with these things.
All right, we're going to move on to some new threads. We've got 112, 242, 134, 76, 243, and 128, and we've got about 6 minutes left. So if you can keep your questions short and the replies short as well, would be great.
I'll try.
112. 112, please stand up. Oh.
Hello, my name is Antonio. I'm from Lab 49. Matt, you started off the talk with 3 words from McCarthy. You just pull it up.
Duty, honor, country.
Yeah,
right?
duty, honor, country. And then you went into the Agile Manifesto, and then also ended with 3 words: honesty, capable, and reach.
Yeah.
I'm new to the context-driven movement, so I'm not sure if one already exists, but is there a testing manifesto?
Oh, yeah.
If not, if there is, I'd like access to it. If not, should we write one, or?
Yeah, wow. So at CAS 2011, I was amazed the last day at breakfast. The morning after the conference was over, the guy next to me having breakfast at the courtyard said, I got to look into this context-driven thing. It seems pretty interesting. And that was the wrong time to say that. So contextdriventesting.com. This is Dr. Kaner's website now, I think. Kem and James wrote this around 2001, 2002. And that is, the value of any practice depends on its context. There are good practices in context, but no best practices. And people working together are the most important part of any project's context. There's lots of detail there. But when we say context-driven, we mean a thing. And if you want to go make a new thing, give me a call.
243.
Katrina again. I was wondering whether the high turnover was an opportunity as well. So you spoke about saving Scrum. To me, if you have a high turnover, then you've got a bunch of people that you can say, this is the way we test.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And if you can market that as, we'll reduce turnover in your team by changing the practice, then yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
Absolutely. So if you have high turnover and testing is kind of not fun, you kind of have to do this stuff you don't think is very valuable, you could look at turnover and see if it's kind of high. And if it is, that might prompt a different discussion of stuff that you learned at the conference, but guys still don't have that problem. I got into testing to test, not to go to meetings and not to write down plans of stuff that I didn't end up doing that way anyway, right?
All right, new 376.
Hello. Just a bit of background. 4 years ago, I was a project manager.
I'm sorry. Welcome.
So when I would go to project management meetings, we would talk about how to get people together, get things done, how do we deliver quality software and things like that, and a lot of with PMP, go training, blah, blah, blah. One thing we didn't do is spend half our time talking about how to please developers. How do we make sure we work with developers and all that? But maybe 30% of my time here I've sort of either heard or talked about how do we please developers. And I'm trying to think it's like us saying that almost puts us in a little, one thing Jonathan mentioned, Clarkin, great shop there is we're at the same level of developers, but which is what I agree with. But if we're here and this is sort of the best and brightest mind sort of, and more than half the time or about half the time we're talking about how we're
Are we?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Can I push back? Like, so when I was at Social Text, I worked with a guy named Dan Bricklin. He invented the spreadsheet. And he put it on a web browser. And like, I can't do that. I'm pretty smart. And I got to be the part of the story of development of that product. And I'm okay with that.
No, but it's a complementary and different skills. So yes,
Agreed.
a developer creates something, but they also don't see the totality of something. So they won't be able, things we do and bugs my team finds are things that our developers think you're magical. I've heard multiple of our people call my people magical because of the things they found, because of things that they weren't able to do. But we come here and it's like, hey, we're at a lower level. And to me, it's sort of like, as a PMP, when I was in project management, that wasn't talked about. We're at an equal member of the team. And I think for us to get there, we have to tell ourselves, and the best and brightest here at CAS is like, hey, we are an equal member of the team when we're sitting on the table. So that's one. So I think, I think we need to, some of the vocabulary and some of the words, I think we need to in order for us, other people, to think we're equal or at the level, I think we have to tell ourselves and get ourselves to the point where we are the same or equal. And the other thing is about sort of PMP, is sort of that certification, whatever, and I'm not a fan of PMPs, but that added a level of sort of the professional imprimatur, or whatever you say that, to the industry, because it was like it's an industry recognized term, and I know there was a big mention of standardization and things, and a big hiss and boo came out, but it may be something that would be beneficial for us if it's done right, to have something like that.
So I recommend self-education. I think there are things that you can do to put the stamp on you in conversation. Stamp is a horrible phrase, but to raise your own skill set. And yes, and I think that's earned. And there's like weekend testers, Miyagi-Do. We've already heard a couple of those.
Right, but that doesn't tell the industry where we are.
And
here I am.
On that passionate note, that winds up open season. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks, Matt Heusser. Well done, buddy. That was awesome.